The cigarettes and ashtrays in the show have nothing to do with smoking. They're actually about my personal health journey to do with my reproductive system. I have had surgeries for fibroids and cysts and eventually a hysterectomy. And I kind of always envisioned that area of my body as an ashtray, that it was meant to be this beautiful space where a baby could grow, and luckily I was able to have one baby, but there was so much trash in there, and so I always pictured it like an ashtray. And the other reason is because every time I've gone to Venice, I notice these beautiful little altars that people will have in their windows or down alleyways, where there'll be a picture of a saint and plastic flowers, but then somebody will put their cigarette butt out on it or put a crushed pop can there. And so it's this beautiful homage to femininity, and then there's a cigarette butt out on it. And that always stuck with me. So when I started putting this show together, all of those things came together, and I ended up making about 3,000 clay cigarettes.
If you take all the factors that add up to who she is, all her life experience, it's easy to see why she's able to set the hook and reel people in very easily. You know, they're very seductive works. Yeah, just seeing this, if you really want to get into it in a much bigger sort of worldview beyond the artist, I think there's lots of parallels you could draw about this body of work in the state of our society today.
I decided to put a little bit of very old Avon perfume, rose-scented Avon perfume, on all of the work, because so many people have said to me when they see it, oh my gosh, this reminds me of my grandmother's powder room or my great Aunt Lucille. And so I thought, well, all right, let's make this a sensory overload and give you the smell that you're kind of expecting as well.
I find it fascinating for somebody who back in the day felt they were on the outside and were told that the work that they did didn't have any sort of social weight or relevance or value, and that perhaps, you know, she would be better suited to pursue a different line of work, you know, maybe on the design end of things, and she wasn't an artist. To then see come full circle 20 years later, where now she is in some ways the institution, like she is the tastemaker. She carries a great sense of weight and importance in this industry.
I think one of the most exciting positives that came out of my show, Self-Preservation, I mean, it was so good for me mentally to process everything I was going through. But at the show, I met so many women who completely understood, who'd been through it as well, or worse, or different, but they understood it. And so I think the more women talk about health issues or anything really, the collage series was called From the Ashes, and it was about so many women I know, including myself, who've been through abusive relationships, health issues, terrible divorces, whatever it is, and they rise again. and they bloom and they come from this muck, from this ashtray, and they bloom again into something even stronger and more beautiful. And that was really important to me when I was making these collages alone in my studio for a year. But to actually see other women react and tear up and say, yeah, you know, I did bloom again. It was one of the most amazing moments as an artist for me. My mother's an artist, and so some of my very first memories are stealing stuff off of her studio table. She said that when I wasn't even 2, my little hand would just come up over the top of the table and take things away. And so, I mean, I was given access to all sorts of materials, but my dad's a PhD scientist, and he was probably more encouraging than my mom even. Like, I think I would have been an artist no matter what either of my parents did. I just could not make stuff. And then you can come back to it and add more or take away or throw it away if it's not quite right and start again. It's really just about being kind of like when we were kids and you weren't worried about galleries, you weren't worried about selling, you were just like cool glitter and orange and pink, and you just made stuff and you didn't worry about much else. That's a bit of a hot mess.
Is one of the greatest things about an artist is an artist creates irrespective of whether they're going to sell the work or anything else. A true artist. And I think with Danielle, you know, she kind of proves that whole sort of concept that art for art's sake, you know, and
it just needs a little structure. Actually, do you have any magazines? I think artists are compelled to do what they do because it's just, for me, if it's in my head, it's almost uncomfortable. I need to get it out onto paper or panel or into a sculpture or something, and until I do, it just rattles around in my head. And I think all artists are that way in their own way, right? They're compelled to do what their head and hands want them to do. I've been lucky enough to travel to lots of places for my work. I've been to Italy and Australia and Paris and London, but I always love coming home. Landing in the Okanagan and knowing that I'm home, it makes the adventures great too. You know, you have this amazing time, but then you don't dread coming home. You get home and you think, oh, I'm so glad that I'm here. And it's a giant exhale, and I savor every single second until I get on another plane to go somewhere else. I grew up in Summerland, so Summerland is my heart. I have nothing but sunshine-filled memories of growing up here, and I feel so blessed that I got to come back. I was gone for 22 years and always wanted to, you know, quote unquote, come home. But I worked in advertising, so I had to be in places like Vancouver and Toronto. So coming back to Summerland for me was absolutely coming home to where my heart is. When COVID first started, I actually felt really blessed to be here because I could still go out for walks. It was March 2020 and there was no leaves on the trees, and the whole world was feeling this isolation and like not sure what to do. And so I would go for a walk every day, and over the weeks, March into April, the valley was waking up. And every walk there was different wildflowers that had popped up. There were blossoms, lilac buds were coming out. And I'm always appreciative of that about Summerland, but to actually be present and be paying attention and looking for it every day, I started gathering one wildflower a day on each walk, and I pressed them and did an entire collage series based on these COVID flowers that I'd found every single day on these walks. A lot of my friends are in Brooklyn and LA. They could not leave their apartments. And we had the lake. We could look out our windows and see the lake and smell, the orchards waking up. So I feel really, really lucky that we got to be here. At OK MoMA right now, there is a show, 2 little paintings by an artist from Saskatchewan who I met in Venice. If you can imagine that. I was teaching a course in Venice to artists from all over the world. One of them was Canadian. And so when I was planning my spring exhibition at OK MoMA, I reached out to Jennifer and said, would you like to put a couple of little paintings in there? And so she made 2 custom pieces for OK MoMA. So they're in there right now. So during the heat wave last summer though, I had an artist from Penticton, Carla Obi. Her work was in there, and it was so hot that the paint started to actually melt. So I quickly took her pieces out, and my son Charlie and I whipped up some cookie dough. We called the show Baked. We took down a little tray of 3 cookies, put them in OK MoMA with a little easel that said Baked, a collaboration between Danielle and Charlie Krysa. We closed up the gallery and they baked, and we ate them about 3 hours later. What I find so exciting about creativity is that everyone does things their own way. So if you have a background in, say, tree falling, and this then becomes your art form, like Graham, for example, it's so cool because I don't work with wood, because that is not, part of my, visual vocabulary. But he's taken something that he does for a living and turned it into art, and he's compelled to do it, which is so exciting. And why not? Good for him. A lot of people would be like, well, I have this idea, but it's just silly, or I have this idea, but that's not my job. My job is this. And I'm not an artist. I'm not trained. Who cares about any of that? If you get a seashell in your hand that you must turn into something, turn it into something. If you have a piece of wood that you cut down that must be turned into a figure, then go and do it.
Give people license that anybody can engage in it. Like, this is not the realm of the elite.
Grade 9 at Summerland Secondary School. You're welcome. If you aren't reflecting who you are in your work, what are you doing?